welcome you all to today's session. So as you can see on the screen, as you would have seen in the invite, today we're chatting all things intranet and AI. So as you jump in, please just make sure you're staying on mute. There'll definitely be opportunities throughout today's discussion for you to jump in and have a chat with us. But maybe in the meantime, if you can access the chat at the moment, please feel free to jump in and introduce yourself. Share where you're joining us from, what you're hoping to get out of today's discussion. The chat will also be the go-to today for any insights you'd like to share throughout, any experiences or questions. You might also be able to see the Q&A section as well if you have any more formal questions that you'd like to ask to the presenters today. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're hosting today's online session, and the traditional custodians of the lands where our participants are located today. I'm located on the central coast of New South Wales, so I would like to acknowledge the Darkinjung people. And I would also like to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I extend my respect to Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are present on today's session. Let's just do a very quick introduction of some of our speakers on today's webinar. Very quick hello from myself first. My name's Emily, and I work with SWOOP Analytics as our Global Head of Growth and Marketing. I'm also joined by some wonderful colleagues of mine. So we have Kjaer, who is our CEO and co-founder at SWOOP Analytics, and Matt Dodd is also presenting on today's session. Matt is our wonderful product director. You'll also see a few other faces from SWOOP joining us on the call today. So you'll have, Fran, Ginny, Sharon, and Sally. So you're definitely well supported if you have any questions or if you need any help in the chat as well. But before I get into the agenda and what we're covering today, we also have a fabulous new face on the SWOOP team that I would love to introduce you to. So if you could all make Sally feel super, super, super welcome. This is Sally's kind of first official webinar with SWOOP, although I know that Sally has been catching up on a lot of the recordings. Sally, would you like to just jump in and share a little bit about yourself and your role at SWOOP?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emily. And good morning, everybody. My name's Sally Cull. I've recently joined the SWOOP Analytics team here as the Business Development Manager looking after APAC. I've spent most of my career in media, helping customers tailor the right advertising solutions for their brands. And now I'm really looking forward to helping organisations like yours unlock the value in their internal comms data and turning those insights into practical solutions. So I'm really excited to learn more about your challenges and your priorities. And I look forward to meeting you all if I haven't done so already. So thank you. And thanks for making me feel so welcome. And back to you, Emily.
Thanks, Sally. Cheers. We're so excited to have you on the team. So just to get into what we're covering off today, we're going to be looking at how employers are actually using AI alongside their intranets, and also looking at some of the latest benchmarking data to really solidify what's happening on the ground around AI and intranets. We're then going to have a chat about structural and governance foundations that AI depends on and why they matter so much. From there, as always, we love to jump into some more of the practical steps to help you with improving usability, engagement, and AI readiness. And finally, we're going to introduce you to SWOOP Analytics' new AI Readiness Index, which is going to help you really understand the starting point that you're sitting at the moment, especially the case for anyone who's currently using SWOOP for SharePoint at the moment, and then also being able to figure out where your focus should be from there. But to get things started, maybe if I could get everyone ready in the chat. This isn't necessarily a poll question. I just wanted to kind of kick off a bit of a discussion around where we're all currently sitting at. I can see we've got just over 80 people here at the moment. So do you currently have AI running on your intranet? Maybe if you'd like to just have a quick reflect, jump into the chat and share what you're currently doing. It might just be a simple yes, no, work in progress. Maybe Kjaer, do you want to also clarify exactly what we mean by this when we say AI running on the intranet? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's sort of, I guess it's kind of like deliberately we stayed a bit loose on this because, I mean, it could be you are testing out SharePoint agents. It could be something else. It could be that you have a third-party AI bot or something. So anything that if you sort of, that you think you're just keen to get a sense of what people are doing, because AI can be applied in so many different ways, right? So we kept it a bit loose. So yeah, very keen to see some of the results that are coming in.
Yeah, let's see. I'm going to have a scroll through the chat here, what people are doing. Oh, thank you for all of the wonderful introductions as well. It's great to see people from all over the country dialing in. Let me have a scroll. So for some people, it's absolutely nothing by the looks of it. Some people are piloting, experimenting with things as we speak. Some it's just for specific subsites. Sorry, you're going to really get me caught on some tongue twisters there. Experimenting, not consistently. Some, of course, using Copilot by the looks of it. Migrating to new SharePoint intranet with AI agent embedded into platform, launching July. Okay, very exciting. Some also have third-party bots. So we've kind of got quite a broad range of answers, really. Everything from no, absolutely nothing, all the way through to, you know, using and experimenting at the moment.
Yeah. I'm glad we kept it sort of quite broad then, because you look at the answers and it is really broad, isn't it?
Yes.
Huge, yeah.
And maybe just to kind of quantify this a little bit as well, and I think some people have already gone ahead and shared a little bit more about this. I just have a quick poll question to follow up with, just to currently describe where you're sitting at the moment. So if you just bear with me one moment, I'm going to launch a quick poll, which will give you some options to answer alongside this. So let me launch this one. Give it a minute or two, and if this doesn't pop up as well, you're also welcome to share in the chat. So how would you describe your current stage of AI adoption for your intranet? I know that some of you have already mentioned that you're already experimenting. So everything from absolutely no plans, no activity yet. Some of you might be at those early stages, maybe running a pilot. And for the ones that do already have it very well established and delivering value, I feel like we maybe need to get you to speak at one of our upcoming festivals potentially. So I'll give you all a minute to answer on that poll. And then we can have a bit of a review of where everyone's sitting.
Also, I'm hoping the value for those of you that are tuning in here is that you also get a sense of what your colleagues and industry peers are doing, and we'll write this up in probably something like a blog post after this event. But it's nice to see that those of you that are in the early stages, there's certainly a lot of you that are doing that. I think that's, you know, even though I think we did see some of that in when we ran a similar poll last year. But I think it's kind of like it's shifting a bit. We're now seeing more people in the actively planning, and you look at that. There's even 14 people who said that is implemented, not fully adopted. And then I think we'll start to see that sort of, you know, that bell curve shifting.
But I think the bottom line here, based on where the majority is still sitting, like I think that there's still certainly a long way to go. And later on in today's session, we'll also be talking about some of the insights that we've compiled from experts in the field. And also to mention that we are currently crunching the numbers on our current SharePoint intranet benchmarking report as well. So we'll be very interested to see if things have started to shift when it comes to AI readiness. But just to kind of maybe do a little bit of reflecting, I'd love to compare some of the results that we're seeing in the poll here to what we're actually seeing at the moment when it comes to AI readiness in the data. So the insights in the table, the graph that you're seeing here on the slide here, this is based on our 2025 SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking Report. And I think quite similar to some of the insights in the poll, we can still see that there's quite a long way to go before intranets are genuinely ready to support AI-driven experiences like chatbots. I think what's really good to know is that this insight isn't just based on assumption and gut feeling, it's based on real usage data. And the data that you're seeing here is based on real-life behaviours from over 238,000 intranet visitors. We looked at about 160,000 intranet pages, and that was across 28 organisations. Our study this year, we do have a larger sample size, which is really exciting. But the outcomes from this analysis that you're seeing here on the screen is exactly why we have developed the AI Readiness Index, and it's to help organizations have more of a practical way to understand exactly how prepared their intranet is right now for AI. But what's interesting is that we didn't have to start from scratch to define AI readiness from that SWOOP Analytics perspective. Many of the signals that we needed are actually already present in SWOOP's dashboards, and especially if you are looking at some of the health scores in SWOOP for SharePoint. But just a bit of background on how we're currently measuring AI readiness. We'll get into this in much more detail a bit later on today. But we're looking at a mix of three different pillars. So we're looking at content readiness, engagement readiness, and search effectiveness. And when we look at things like content effectiveness, AI is only going to be as good as the content that's behind it. So if we're looking at things like outdated content, if it's poorly maintained, if it's owned by people who no longer work in the organization, it very quickly becomes unreliable. And so then when we start to pivot and look at things like engagement effectiveness, it's looking to see if people are actually engaging with the content. So if it's actually being used and being read, we would use that as an indicator of that content being a little bit more useful than the flip side where, maybe it's not being used much at all. That would be an indicator of low value. And then technically we would kind of give it a lower ranking. And then when we look at things like search effectiveness, being able to layer in things like your exit rates, if there are failed searches, the things that will tell us if there are gaps with the content. So if search is still struggling, then AI is going to struggle too because it's drawing from those same foundations. And in terms of what we found across those 28 organizations, if you wanted to put a goal against AI readiness, we would suggest aiming for a score above 54. And this would place you in the top 20% of performers globally that we have seen within the study. So with employees turning chatbots, employees are turning much more to those chatbots instead of, maybe using more of the traditional search. It's really good that, we need to make sure that these bots are actually giving good advice. They're, making sure that they're not giving bad advice or, using outdated answers. We want to make sure that there's that consistent trust in the intranet and then also trust in digital tools as a whole, because that trust can really quickly start to break down. The key thing is to start small. And in terms of, the how and some of the things that we would suggest, and also just to point your attention to that average score where it's currently sitting. So the average AI readiness score that we're seeing from the current benchmarks is that 51.1 out of 100. Something that we would suggest is to really focus on content quality and structure. And that's where we would definitely be pointing you to things like the health score in SWOOP Analytics for SharePoint intranet. And that's the thing that's going to give you that really clear evidence-based view of how your content is set up to support AI. So this is looking across a mix of lots of different things. We're looking at clarity, we're looking at structure, findability, consistency, quality, and these are all of the elements that AI is going to really be relying on to generate accurate responses and trustworthy responses for our end users. But improving the score isn't about creating more content necessarily. It's about improving on what you already have. And a really key part about that is educating content editors on how to write for AI. And we're going to have a bit of an example that we'll run through in just a moment. But the same principles that help employees also help AI. So we're looking at things like clear language, consistent terminology, strong factual accuracy in the content that you're pulling together. And to make it measurable, that's where we would also give you that benchmark to aim towards. So having a score above 54, we would say is a really good starting point. But what we consistently see is that organizations who focus on content health as the kind of base level starting point, these are the organizations that are far better positioned to be safely and confidently rolling out more AI experiences, whether it be, Copilot or any other conversational tools. It also, just to also call out, this isn't just like a one and done, brush my hands off, we're all sorted, our content is ready for AI. It's an ongoing discipline. You have to consistently be looking at the content quality, looking at those clear standards and ensuring you have consistent measurement. But I've spoken about some of these numbers, we've looked at a graph, we can see how it all stacks up. But just to give you a really quick example of looking at this in practice, I'm wondering if we can totally expose SWOOP Analytics and our own intranet content, maybe just for a quick moment. So Kjaer, if you feel comfortable
Yes.
Would you be open to maybe sharing an example of how we would look at this for our own
Yes.
content and what our current score is?
But can I just say, so Emily and I were talking about this, right? And you know what they say about like the plumber who's got a house where everything leaks and the hairdresser with the kids have, anyway. So it was a bit with a sort of trepidation that I thought, okay, I'll share this with you anyway. Don't laugh too much at us. So I'm just going to show you our intranet dashboard. I'm going to scroll down to the part that has the AI Readiness Index, which you see down here. So 57. It does say needs attention because we can get better. And actually, we're updating this based on our most recent benchmarking data. So whilst Emily said that the goal was 54, actually, Matt will talk a little bit more about where we are really setting the threshold inside the report now. So we also have work to do. But it's interesting that when I've shown this to organizations or the organizations that are really good on the I guess on managing their content, you can just see that they get the best scores. So back to you, Emily.
Thank you. Let me just load up where we were up to before. But I following on from some of the questions that we've already asked as well about what you're currently doing. I just have another very quick poll question that I would like to run. Let me just make sure the last one is closed off and I'll launch our second poll question. How much of your intranet is ready for AI? So this is basically just looking at that content side of things. So I've got a bit of a sliding scale again. Hardly any content is ready, all the way through to being super confident in saying, yes, almost everything is ready and we're ready to implement more AI tools. I'll give you all a moment to reflect on that. And if you can't see the poll, feel free to share a little bit more in the chat about your experience. Looks like majority probably don't have 100% confidence in where the content is sitting right now. So for the majority, small pockets are certainly ready. Our next most popular answer being hardly any content is ready. And again, we've got a 3% there. Almost everything is ready. I really want to hear from these people. What have you done, and how have you? Maybe they're using SWOOP potentially.
Well, I think what the other insight here is that, and it come back to that key recommendation you had up a couple of slides ago, Emily, is starting small is really good. Like many of you have 40% saying their small pockets are ready. So that's obviously that's an obvious place to start in those places.
Excellent. Let me close off that poll there. But it's good to be able to kind of get that baseline of where we're all currently sitting as far as the content goes. But I know Kjaer and Matt, you've been running a bit of an experiment. So let's maybe dive into the experiment that you've been running in the background.
Yes. I'll tell you what we did. So it's a part of the benchmarking study we did. We spoke with our chief scientist, Lawrence Lockley, about how can we test the difference between something that's high AI readiness and something that's got low AI readiness. As you said in the poll, some of it you feel really comfortable about, and some of you going I'm not quite sure. So we thought, AI is so clever, isn't it? Does it really matter? Can it actually, if you got something that is really sort of like poorly written, like, okay, if it's outdated and it's factually wrong, we know it's not going to deliver a good result, right? But what if it's just like poorly written versus something that's really well written? And those are the two scenarios we wanted to test, sort of good versus bad. So I'm going to take you through the example that we did, and you might want to try this out or just take the learnings away from what we've done. But before I dive into that, I just want to make sure that you have a good understanding of how these chatbots actually work, because certainly something we've learned a lot because we had to build our own chatbot, Dr. Swoop. So for those of you that are not familiar with, and it's not too technical, but this is more like from a conceptual level, how these bots work. If you look at it over on the left-hand side, this is probably the experience that we'll all see from using a chatbot, Copilot or whatever. And in this question, the employee asks, what's our policy for remote work? Can you help? And then, at that point, it's going to go, I'm thinking about it, researching or looking at it or whatever. And what actually happens while it's doing that thinking bit is the following. It look at the message you typed in, and then it'll try to get from it what's called intents. So it'll take your search query, which what effectively is, and sort of like rejig that. So it kind of gets up to 3, 4, 5 different intents for what you're trying to search for. So it's trying to predict what you're really looking for. Then it'll take that, and then it'll search across your company source content. So now we're not talking public ChatGPT or Claude or any of that. We're talking about the chatbot that runs on your intranet. So it looks through all the content that you've made available to the bot. And for this question here, we can imagine that it's looking through all sorts of company policies. Then it's looking for bits and pieces in that content that relates to that intent of what you're trying to find out. It looks for those. Then it prioritizes all these search results and go like, I found all these snippets. They're sort of technical called chunks. Find them together. And it goes like, this one is more better matched than that one. This one is newer. This one is better. And then say, this is the chunks of text I found that matches the question that the person is asking. And then it's using one of these large language models that is really a way that the AI bot is using to speak English or French or German or whatever language you so desire. So it's not supposed to be using public content for this. It's supposed to be using just the content that's in your within the source content that you've given it. But it's just then stringing together sentences to provide the answer that you then see over the left-hand side, which is certainly, when considering hybrid work, yada, yada, yada. So what we wanted to test was what happens if that box in the middle that says company source content, if that is good versus what happens if it's bad. All right, let's have a look at the question or the two sources. So if you could go to the next slide, Emily, this little video starts playing. This is just so you can get a sense of this really well-defined content. You can see high AI readiness. It's got like heading. It's got quite a lot of text actually. It's got subheadings. It's got bullet points. Everything is organized very nicely and neatly and easy to read. It even finishes up with some case studies. Some examples. Now, if we go to the next one, this is the one where we wrote it, where it was like pretty average. Look at how short it is, and it's kind of vague. There's no headings. I think for all of you that are internal communicators, if you look at this, and spelling mistakes, all sorts of things, even though from an AI perspective, the spelling mistakes they don't really matter. But we were just trying to do something that was just really poorly written. So now what we then did. Then we created 2 different bots, and we asked the same question, this one, to both of those bots that were grounded in the 2 different quality of files. Right? So the question was, I had a request from a staff member to work flexibly. The majority are sole working parents who rely on a relative for childcare. I'm inclined to grind a hybrid arrangement, but unsure how to go about it. Can you provide guidance? You also notice that if this was just done as an intranet search, people would probably just have said hybrid work policy, and that's it. That's all they would search for, right? But now we get all this additional context, and this is the bit that's turned into intents. You search across, find a group, and it generates the answer. Now, on the next slide, we're going to show you the 2 answers. Now, I know it's very dense here, but I want to show it to you in full. I'm not expecting you to read this, but I'll tell you this. Over on the left-hand side, we have the answer that's based on the high-quality document. And on the right-hand side, we have the answer that's based on the low-quality content. Now, I think if you looked at this as a normal employee, you look at that, if you read it, they both sound pretty good. Both of them. They're like relatively the same amount of text. It's actually put sentences together that sounds really meaningful. It's actually, when I read through this, the advice you're given is actually, you look at that and say, that sort of makes sense, both of them. Now you can then jump to the conclusion and say, so it doesn't matter then if we feed our bot with high quality content or low quality content, does it? Because it's pretty good at answering anyway. Now here's the huge warning flag if you do that. When you compare the answer the bot has given with the information that's actually in the source file that we've given it, if you click one forward, Emily, you'll see the result on the left-hand side. So we can score it with a 9 out of 10 that the answer the bot provided was very well grounded in the source file that was it provided with. However, on the right-hand side, the score is 6 out of 10. Now, as an employee, you don't know that one is a very well-grounded answer in actual company policy, whereas on the right-hand side, it's actually not very well-grounded in company policy. If you look at the answer you can maybe just see between behind the circle, the fifth point with a trial period. It comes up with the idea to, why don't you consider implementing a trial period to see how the hybrid arrangement works in practice? It sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? It's just that if you were, don't do that now, Emily, but if you were to go back to the source file, it doesn't talk about a trial period at all. But what actually happens is that as the bot is trying to please you as a user, it'll try to sort of part hallucinating. It's not that they're saying anything wrong. It's just like filling the vacuum because our company sources haven't got anything about this. So it'll try and find and make the answer look good. So I think you've got to be really careful when you are considering your intranet content. And then you're saying, oh, let's run an experiment. Let's get this up and running. You look at the data, the results, and you say, that looks pretty good. Like I can't, and the first thing, you can't see it really makes a big difference.
I'd really frame it as it's a credibility trap. They look credible answers. And because the person reading that is one step removed from the actual content, they are going to take it at face value. That's the other important thing. Obviously, if you were in a traditional non-AI experience, you'd read the content and you'd make your own judgment and you'd be looking at the source content. You've not got something in between. And it does remind me, it's a human bias, but that Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's speaking, it's like it's overconfident, it's really happy with its answers, it's going to sound really confident, but actually it's underestimating its own abilities in being able to give you a credible answer. So yeah, definitely one that strikes worrying to me as a former intranet manager.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something that we got to be really watch out for. And vice also, I think it's a really good idea to run these small scale experiments with small data sets where the content really well, and you ask a set of questions and you just do the testing and see whether or not those answers are actually right. So I hope you'd enjoy that as an example. I think for us here at SWOOP, it was certainly somewhat of an eye-opener to like how easy it is for us to be tricked by the technology, and just how important it is that our content that sits behind this is correct.
I think my next question off the back of that as well, and I'd also like to ask this question to the audience, like if you would like to jump in and share in the chat with those examples that you've just shared as well, Kjaer, should we be writing for humans or should we be writing for AI if we're looking at content across the internet? And I know a lot of the insights that we share as a part of our dashboards, it's all about, content quality and making it engaging. And I feel like the next layer to this is making sure that it's all of the right details so that AI is going to give you trustworthy and accurate answers. So I would love to ask people to share in the chat, like, what should we be writing for now with some of this background and this experiment in mind? How would we approach it?
It's an interesting question, right? Because but also, I assume all of you are involved with SharePoint and publishing there, and you can publish something in different languages. like, should we have a new language that's called like the AI version of this document? And Matt and I actually had a discussion about this yesterday. And Matt, you had an interesting perspective, right? Because you were saying, why is that an all?
Yeah, I guess, yes, why is there an or? Because I think if you're structuring and writing in a really clear way, and I mean, I used to do a lot of writing for the web, training, different things. The whole way that we've built, and the whole way we built SWOOP out was to look at that, making sure that content was structured, they're right amount of headings, there wasn't just big walls of text. And I think that's really pertinent when we come across to both human users. You know, you can look at that a document with nice headings and paragraphs, you can immediately find what you want. It's easy for you as a person to read it, but actually that is the same then for me, for the AI. You've got a heading. If it's a clear heading and there's words, it's going to add strength to whether that's the right section. When they look at the sort of model language, whereas it's just a paragraph, it's kind of making its own mind up as to which point in that paragraph is more important than others. So having that structure, I think, is really important. And I think ultimately, I also think that there's going to be a bit of a gap, and we can talk about some of this in the challenges I know a little bit later, around people are still going to want to check, they're still going to go to your intranet pages, particularly if your bot has the citations and the links through. You know, they might just want to go and double check. So having that content written and having it complete, I kind of came up with this idea, you know, it's that clarity and completeness that is really important. I don't know, I've certainly been traveling a lot, a bit recently, and, you know, looking on public websites, and you get, the worst thing for me is when you get content on a website and then it doesn't give you the answer, so you then go searching for the answer. You might use an AI bot. The AI bot's only going to give you the same answer as what's in the original content. And then if you're in the call center, they're going to use the same knowledge base to answer your question. And actually, you know, you do need to make sure that it is complete. So maybe that's one thing where there is a difference between humans and AI is the level of detail. But I don't know, maybe I used to pitch the intranet as being the quick guide, but maybe we do need to make it the quick guide and the full set of instructions as well when it comes to this.
It's interesting. See, I think is it right? Those of you that are contributing to the chat, I think you're very aligned with what Matt is saying, that it's not an and or an or. Like, if you write for humans, you're also writing for AI. I think, Matt, you got a good point there, because in the example before that I showed you with the high readiness and low readiness, the high readiness was, you know, well structured, nicely laid out. You can imagine that would be pleasing for the eye. As a person coming in, they can just scan through. Even having those, remember they had those little 3 case studies, the high quality,
Yes.
And that really also helps someone interpret a policy or procedure. And maybe we've certainly seen that, because when we've been writing our own help desk material in SWOOP, I know we've gone in and added more specification, more examples, because AI does thrive. You know, it can easily summarize things, right? But it needs to have lots of content to be able to summarize. So my only point of this is that maybe we'll see a future where the AI version will be that, like, very expanded version that we know the humans are going to give up reading. They're never going to get to the end, or they're going to go overwhelmed with all the information. But we can use AI to summarize it.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. The headings help.
Yeah.
For definite. Yeah, and we've got evidence of that with our scanning and things like that, the way that people read pages. So,
yes.
I'm just thinking, if people wanted to dive in more detail as well, I do have some of these details to share at the end of today's session, but we have a dedicated success guide that we've written, which is all about how to get your intranet ready for AI. We actually have some fresh insights being released as a part of that guide. So I'm just thinking if maybe one of my colleagues could sneakily pop the link to that in the chat. I think it'd be a good point for everyone to jump in and make sure that they have access to those great fresh insights as a part of the guide. Thank you, Fran. Amazing. Thanks, everyone. And also thank you to those who have just also shared some of those insights as well in the chat. I think as Kai and Matt mentioned, I think a lot of what you're sharing is definitely echoed in what we're seeing. And I think also just in the discussion that we've just had just now, I also love the comment about, being, how we used to be trained on writing for SEO, and now it's kind of, how do we write for AI, and making sure we've got all of that detail in there. I'm also wondering, like Kai and Matt, what about when this comes to news content? Would we approach that differently when it comes to writing for news on the internet? I think there's a comment there about news versus, policies and content.
That's
yes, probably. I mean, ultimately, you've got your idea with news is it's a much more, you're expecting humans probably to read those articles directly, if you're promoting them or doing those sorts of things, rather than AI summarize them. But obviously that will be soon. But I think that also crosses over to how long you leave these things available, and I think and also how you build out your agents. So knowing that something's news content rather than sort of trusted or policy content is perhaps something that you'd want to consider putting into your, like the built-in prompts that when you build out your agents, so you can say, ignore news items, or put less weight on a news item. And the reason that's important is again, it depends on how long you keep your news hanging around. But that's out-of-date content, and we'll probably get into that a bit more detail, is going to be a massive thing. So news, it's the same. I guess it's no different. Again, ultimately, your AI is trying to serve a human need, and humans want that confidence and trust in the content. So if you're showing stuff that's out of date, news is likely to be one of those things. It's going to perhaps give you the wrong result. I see it all the time when I'm searching and using AI. If you look at anything like sports results or anything like that, if you don't actually specify, the date of the match or whatever it is, you'll get, last year's results, or it'll get confused, and you start seeing these summaries with wrong, in effect, again, wrong information.
I was talking to
oh, so you go, Kai.
Yeah, I'll just say I was talking to a US telco yesterday, and they were showing me it wasn't a Copilot bot. It was another. I can't recall the name of the bot technology that they were using, but it was clear that they'd gone in and said these are the SharePoint files. It wasn't even down to this is the folder. It was like these are the 10 or 15. I think they had about 50 files that they are the ones that should be relied upon. And to the point, I think that's Alex Rush who's writing the chat. You structured metadata, and I think it depends on, as long as you can find a way of pointing the bot to the content you really want it to be grounded in. I think that's fine. You just want to make sure, as Matt was saying, if you just say, everything on the SharePoint site, and it's a mix of, files, pages, and news, and some of it is old, some of it is not, then, well, you're asking for trouble, aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, maybe a point for us to reflect on maybe some of the new or emerging challenges that we're finding as well.
Yeah.
Matt.
Well, so the thing is, right, this is a brave new world, isn't it? And I think it's just like with SEO and any kind of new technology we've seen. Suddenly, our worlds are rocked a little bit, and suddenly there are new and interesting challenges we hadn't really thought about. That suddenly is going to we have to consider and be aware of. And I think there's some of these that you can probably see on the back of what we've gone through so far. Some of those new things we really have to start to think about. Prompt and answer accuracy. As you just saw, the bot might hallucinate and stitch together partial answers. And especially if you're doing an intranet bot where people are relying on the information they've been provided to make decisions, then we will need in the future to be able to trace the responses back to a source. So if I go and say, I, as a manager, asked the hybrid work bot what advice I should give, and the bot said, "Well, you should run an experiment." And then my boss says, "Why did you run an experiment?" "Oh, the bot said so." So you're gonna be able to say, as the bot owner, to say, "Well, yeah, that's right," or "Oh, it shouldn't have done that." But that there's going to be some way of tracking the source files, whether they're right and whether the answers are right. So this thing with prompt and answer accuracy, we can sort of predict is going to be a big thing in the future. But then once we have it in place, as you all know that, right? I guess we can, I know Matt is going to cover something about that. There's a lot of challenges that remain, right? There's some news. Oh, just go one back, Emily.
Sorry, too fast.
The governance now, we've got to consider this thing about model management. And many of you have probably already heard about, there are different versions of GPT. There's we started with 3.5, Turbo 4, and then there's Claude. There's all these other ones that are coming out. So now we're going to think about, which model are we using, and does the answers it gives, do they vary depending on what model I've chosen? When do I retrain it? Does it automatically retrain when I put a new version in there? When do I work in the draft version, and when do I publish that to the bot so it knows about it? And how long time does it take for it to be trained on that new content? And just things we might not have really thought about before. Answers might be easy, but we need to know about this. As I'm probably mentioned this thing about when the bot provides an answer, who is going to be held accountable for that answer? Is that you, because you created the bot? Are you just going to say, "Oh, that's IT"? Is it the content owner who's going to say, "Well, it's based on my source material"? But maybe it was the language model that was chosen. So who owns what? You can see how we got to figure this out. The other thing that's kind of really, really interesting. You saw that the flexible question answer, how elaborate that was, quite long, right? I'm thinking about sole parents, how do I do this? What do you think? Versus just doing a search on the internet saying flexible work policy. Now suddenly we will have far, far better insights into what people are really trying to find out. All those things where we're going to be trying to use for a search, we look for search terms, and what are the successful or non-successful search terms. But I hope you can see here how valuable it would be if I can see the context of what people are asking about. It's this person is interested in the sole parent perspective of flexible working. And maybe we need to know how we fill the knowledge gap if we haven't got good documents for that. And then, of course, there are all these sort of ethical and compliance controls that maybe we can hope that some of the providers like Microsoft or others, Anthropic, that they sort of miraculously sort out. But if you provide the bot, then, well, I guess it's part of it is your problem or challenge to overcome. Yes. But as I said, some of those challenges remain the same, right, Matt? And there's a bunch of those that it doesn't matter whether we have bots or not.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, clearly one of the messages through there is that content quality it's so important. It's only going to answer on what you put it on. So outdated content and that whole idea of trust and confidence is just amplified. I mean, I've always been a proponent, if someone looks at a page, if it's a couple of months old, what they're going to do, they're going to ask their colleague, "Hey, is this still right?" It's a couple of months old. We're just going to amplify all of those kind of problems. We're going to start uncovering loads of duplication. How is it, I know this was have people got their own little sites, have different departments got their own content and their own view on something. And if you ask that bot, is it going to give everybody the view of a certain department? Because there may be discrepancies between the two. So I think that's good. That's always a challenge. It's been a challenge when we've just had search. And in my very simplistic way, I kind of just think of a lot of the agents as Kjaer explained, it's like they're just a really enhanced level of searching and then putting an answer on top of it. So that search is still a key core part of what's going on. So that links into the duplication, the ownership, and obviously that information architecture You know, it's why tagging is so important. There was a question in the chat about you know, metadata, because you can put so much emphasis in the chatbot creation, that agent creation around what it pays attention to. I think is really important. Again, and depending on whether you're using third-party Copilot, there is potential around how this visibility cuts across permissions. Has it? I still haven't really. I know Microsoft sort of say that it should only answer the stuff that you've got access to. I'm sure there might be some gaps that we'll see that. And this last one I think is really important. The whole thing about change and adoption. The more and closer that we are to AI, we use it ourselves, invest in it, we think it's great. It's easy to forget that for a lot of people, the idea of writing a prompt is still really, really scary. You know, they might, as Kjaer said, you know, they might just put in flexible working in the AI as opposed to, I'm this person, this is my context, this is the kind of answer that I want. That's quite a sophisticated level. So until we start getting sort of AI native staff members coming into an organization, there's going to be a lot of people around who just don't know what to do. You know, they've always gone to the intranet, they'll still go to the intranet, they'll look for an answer and they trust themselves rather than a bot. So I think, yeah, I've seen it. I mean, when did Google come out? 2004. And if you go and actually watch users use Google, you know, or any other search engine, I can guarantee, you know, 80-90% of them will not be using any of the little special parameters. The fact that you can search just the site, you know, that if you put things in quotes, it looks for it exactly. You know, all of those little things that I guess kind of digital native people will do kind of quite naturally. A majority of people don't do. And if that, you know, if you've got a very mixed workforce, you'll be getting all of those things. They won't be using ChatGPT in their normal life. They won't be used to writing prompts. So yeah, those things still happen. But yeah, the good thing is if you're writing, as I think we've already started, if you're starting to write for humans, then hopefully, you know, you'll be writing for AI and what you have in your intranet will serve both purposes.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. I can see that there's a few additional comments in the chat there as well. I'm thinking, Kjaer, Matt, if you wanted to maybe go in and review and provide a few responses as well as we kind of get towards the end of what we'll be chatting through today. I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to reflect on some of the insights and actions that we have uncovered from discussions we've had with some experts in the field. So what we've got here is a compilation of insights from, we've got Frank, Sam, we've got Sue, Esben, Jonas, and Jesper. So in our 2025 SharePoint Internet Benchmarking Research, we asked these intranet specialists and thought leaders about how AI is really impacting digital workplaces today. And what we found was the consistent message was that while AI offers real opportunity, most organizations are still quite early in their adoption and they need to get their content foundations right first. So one of the consistent messages that we heard from practitioners is that AI isn't the cleanup tool, it amplifies what already exists. So before expecting AI to deliver value, organizations need to really address outdated content, duplication, pages that no longer serve a purpose. And what this means is deleting what's no longer relevant, cleaning up the remains, and organizing content properly so that AI has something really reliable to work with. It also really reinforces long-standing intranet principles highlighted by Sam and Sue. So strong content foundations come before new technology. The practitioners also agree that AI really quickly surfaces the existing content issues rather than solving those issues. So outdated, duplicated, poorly structured content becomes far more visible once AI starts generating those answers. And I think it was Frank and Esben both, they emphasized that AI acts as a spotlight. It reveals more of the weaknesses rather than the things that maybe would have been previously hidden or ignored. it means that, you know, intranet hygiene is more important than ever. And I think the last point there is just really about getting back to the basics, essentially. So clear ownership, sensible naming conventions, having archiving practices in place, well-managed permissions. They're all of the conditions that are going to create more of those trustworthy AI outputs. So I think it was Jonas and Jesper that had highlighted that without those basics, AI risks confidently surfacing information that might actually be the wrong information or not quite right, which we saw in some of the experiments that we ran just a little bit earlier. We do have a lot of these insights as well factored into our benchmarking report from last year. We also published some blog posts as well that really nicely summarize a lot of these insights. Just to wrap up with a few final inserts from the experts as well, a really strong theme is that AI works best as an assistant, not necessarily as the replacement for human judgment. So it's really helpful for the drafting, summarizing, refining, reviewing the content and being able to do that at scale. However, practitioners and, you know, all of the people that we have here on today's session, it's really important that you still have that human oversight to really ensure that the accuracy is right, the relevance is there, and that you've got that tone spot on for your own organization's content. And then just maybe the last point as well is that, you know, the experts really consistently agree that most organizations are still in the very early stages of AI readiness, particularly when it comes to intranets. It's good to get in and do a little bit more of that experimentation, making sure that you don't have that content sprawl happening, duplicated pages, poor ownership, all of the things that we really dive into in the world of SWOOP and looking at analytics for SharePoint as well. Now, I'm just conscious of time, and Kjaer and Matt, I know that you had sort of worked through a bit of an example of how long that could potentially take to work through it all.
So I don't want to, okay, so let's do this really briefly, right? Because the conclusion is that it's just impossible to sit down, realistically work your way through an intranet with, let's say, I don't know, 2,000 pages, you know, and just kind of like, oh, let's clean it all up, right? It's just, you know, look at the calculation. Like in this example, like 2 years of full-time effort, it's not going to happen, right? No one's going to prove that. So those of you who said a little part of our intranet is actually probably ready, you know, let's go over there. But what you can also do, and I guess that's you know, I guess it does rely on you having, I guess, access to better analytics. Those of you that are lucky enough already to have SWOOP Analytics, I'd certainly recommend that you start to find those aspects or those parts of the intranet that have a really good AI readiness score. And it should be pretty easy to find out. You can just go in and click intranet sites and you look at the scores and see where do they have like a good health score. Even though the health score and the AI score are not the same, it'll give you a really good starting point. But it's about then taking, instead of 2,000 pages, go down to what can we do realistically. But if you don't know, like, you know, yeah, it's this approach certainly is not going to work out, is it? So instead, start with getting some numbers on what's part of the intranet are really useful. You can get there a lot faster if you have good data and analytics support you in that decision making. And you can probably go in with a high level of comfort and say to your executives, I want to pilot an AI intranet bot to this part of the intranet because we're really comfortable that it's there. I should also just point out that very briefly, some of you might be totally unaware of things that are hiding in those SharePoint like folders and subfolders. We have customers come on and it's like, oh no, and they go, where did those 20,000 files come from? Like, and someone is like has taken control of a part of a folder that no one really knew about, and it was kind of like hidden somewhere. But AI will find that if you're not very careful, right? That's what I say. So you really got to make sure that you say that we want to run here for these documents in this area, and I guess the better intelligence you have about the usage and the health of the intranet, the better. Matt, you just want to take us through very briefly like how that AI readiness thing actually works.
Yeah, and there were a few questions earlier around like how do we weigh, you know, why do we include engagement and different things? I mean, the basis and the biggest chunk of this score is the content readiness. So this is about the current, is the content current? And if there's one thing, you know, to take away, and we've got extra research coming around this, is that the fresh content is a huge factor in not only engagement, but the readiness, making sure that people are confident in the answers. So you may have these cycles and different information management cycles that say, yeah, as long as it's updated every 2 years, that's fine. Okay, that might be when you need to actually make a formal review of the policy, but make sure the pages are at least showing that they've been updated recently. That will give a huge boost. The accuracy, it's all accuracy, things like spelling, mistakes, all builds that confidence and trust in the content. And also the other part of the content readiness we look at, as well as the kind of quality, is that experience. So the structure, has it got headings, has it got paragraphs? We measure those two things already separately. That's really what goes into that content readiness. And it's really a big part of, is your content well governed? So that's really key. It really gives that clarity. The second part, the engagement. Now, why would we look at that? Well, part of this is, it's almost that social proof of your existing intranet users. If they're already engaging and using content, then they are placing value on that content. A lot of the AI agents, Copilot, they have access to things like the Microsoft Graph as part of some of the structure. So again, content that is regularly accessed is probably going to weigh higher in their search results than content that isn't viewed at all. So making sure we factor in what content is being engaged with is really important. And then, as we said, I mean, the search, it is it is kind of a glorified search engine to lots of cases. I know there's a lot more to that, and people feel free to slate me in the comments. But because it's relying on that middle section in the model that Kjaer described, it is getting search results. If people can't find results, then the AI is not going to find results. So when we look at search effectiveness, we look at how many searches are undertaken that either end with people leaving on those search results pages, they haven't found what they've looking for, or where the search result is not bringing back any answers, because those are your content gaps. And the more content gaps you have, the more you are at risk of the language model filling the gaps, creating sensible sounding and credible answers that might not be based on your actual content, but are just coming from its training from the large language model that sits behind it. We combine all of that, we weight it, put it in the score. Currently, we're putting, although let's say the benchmark came in at 54 as being a good thing, we've indexed it. We use anything above about 60 is going to get like a good score. Anything below 40 really need to probably pay attention and do some serious work on. 40 to 60, obviously, as this one in the example shown there, is something that probably just does need some care and attention. But it's not to say that it won't give you effective answers. So I guess it's thinking about it in that sort of risk lens.
Thank you. We gotta head back to Emily, because I can see we have about a minute to go.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, for anyone who is curious about understanding what their current level of AI readiness is, if you're already using SWOOP for SharePoint intranet, you can access this number today. So what I would suggest, please do reach out to Fran. Fran, if you want to wave your arms around. I think everyone, if you're a SWOOP customer, you definitely know who Fran is. So please make sure to reach out to Fran, and Fran will give you the full rundown. If you don't currently have SWOOP running, what I would suggest is you book some time with Kjaer and Sally to look at the AI Readiness Index report in a bit more detail, so you can get a better understanding of how it's measuring it, how you could also apply it to your own intranet and run a trial. what I would also suggest is you can, in the meantime, download the Getting Your Intranet Ready for AI Success Guide, which I know we've already shared some links to. So please do book in some time with Kjaer and Sally if you haven't had a chance to use SWOOP before, or book in with Fran, of course, if you'd like to run through in more detail.